All right, welcome everyone. My name is Gary Carner. I'm the author of Reflectory, The Life and Music of Pepper Adams, and also Pepper Adams' Joy Road, an annotated discography. With me is Aaron Lington, who once again is functioning as the host here. This is our third Pepper Adams Roundtable. The previous two are posted at pepperadams.com. Although we've had some last-minute cancellations this time around, including our guest of honor, we still have a very esteemed panel of guests, musicians who are eager to talk about Pepper Adams. So I've encouraged everybody originally to keep their comments brief, but now with these cancellations, stretch out all you want because we want to keep this thing flowing. We have 2 hours or so. And also feel free to ask questions of all the panelists. We've done some of these in the past, and people have been very respectful, but a little hesitant to ask questions and respond to the present presenters. So I want everybody to understand that this should be a fun give and take. So why don't we get started with Charles Papazov, because he has to run to a show. So
Charles,
hello, everybody. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm also an actor. And it's funny because I feel that that's what we do. We tell stories when we play. And either acting or playing saxophone, we're telling stories. And I came to Pepper in a strange way. I'm more originally out of the rock idiom, and I got turned on to baritone sax very young with John Sermon and the album Extrapolations with John McLaughlin. And from there, at one point, I heard the album Encounter with Zoot Sims. And that was it, man. Pepper, he had the raw energy that I liked in rock, and obviously harmonic sophistication and everything. And I got a chance to take lessons with him, not enough to my taste, but there's one thing that remains in my mind from my time with him is he always said he's a school of one. An original school of one. The original is my word. He didn't use that. And a school of one. And I was wondering, what did he mean by that? You know? And I think it really dawned on me that the important thing is to cultivate your own voice and to tell the story. So that's what I've been trying to do. And it's always a pleasure I just recently re-listened when Gary invited me this, re-listened to Encounter, and it hasn't aged at all. That album is still as swinging and as grooving as it was the first time I heard it. And that's basically it. I mean, I'm still copying his solos. I mean, I know Gary used one of my transcriptions at one point in his life decades ago, and I'm still doing it. And I've over the years, I've developed different aspects of my artistic pursuits. I write a lot of music and acting. I've been involved with Shakespeare, and I put some Shakespeare sonnets to music, made a record with that. But it's all stems still with the energy and the precise precision that Pepper had. He was so precise in his phrasing and his. I don't think he was called Knife for nothing. There was a reason for it. That's pretty much all I could give you guys. And it's still, I remember fondly his laugh, the sound of his laughter, the sound of his voice was unique. You could recognize it amongst the crowd. And he was a storyteller par excellence. And that's what I think we can all aspire as musicians to be, as storytellers, so that our audience gets the drift of what we're saying and what we're trying to communicate. Music has always been for me a bit more than entertaining. It's like a religious experience of some sort. I don't want to get esoteric on anybody, but at the same time, it's a bit of that. I've been always drawn to that kind of vibe. And Pepper, in his very unassuming way, was extremely spiritual in the way he played for me and the way I received it. Voila.
Fantastic. Can I, for those of you who are listening or will be listening, because this will be posted on YouTube and at various websites, there's a number of interviews with Pepper talking from interviews he did on the radio in Canada, in Europe, and the United States, if you want to hear his voice, as Charles mentioned. Charles, can you talk about your last time with Pepper, the Spectrum concert, and how emotional that was for everybody?
Yeah, he played in Montreal with I think it was it the big band? The Denny
No, it was with
Christensen's
Kenny
big band?
Alexander's trio, with
Oh,
Vic
yeah,
Angelillo and
yeah.
Cisco Normand.
Yeah, because he did do a record with Denny Christensen's big band.
Yeah, about a year before that.
He was quite sick at that point, and but he still played beautiful. And he was using, for all the saxophone buffs, he was using a what was the name of the guy from England who it'll come back to me.
Lawton.
Lawton, yes, he was using a Lawton mouthpiece. Very close, number 4, hard weeds. Okay, shop talk. And he had his baritone and sounding just as beautiful as ever. It was quite moving. The Spectrum now has become a condo building, so there's not going to be any shows there again. But
that was part of the festival, of course. And can you talk about the lessons a little bit, and we'll let you go. But you did. Yeah. You're one of the only people that had a lesson with him, David Schiff, who we'll hear from on Roundtable number 4 in a few months, if we can do that. Couldn't make it today, but he also took a lesson with Pepper.
Well, first of all, he was a true gentleman. He came to get me at the subway. He would live the ways not close to any subway, and he came to get me and drove me to his house, and we did it at his home. And I remember that I expressed that I enjoyed his compositions, and I had been copying his compositions, transcribing them. And he said, "Oh, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that." I'm sorry, I can't imitate his voice. He said, "Here," and he gave me a whole bunch of charts, and he said, "At least you'll have the real shit." And then I'm going, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, on this," he illustrated the point by a record he did with Kenny Wheeler in a rhythm section. And I forget the name of the tune, where the bass player, there's a whole bass thing written out, and the bass player just didn't play the right notes. And I forget who it was. But anyways, he says, "At least with the charts, you'll play the correct notes." Okay.
I think it was Clint Houston, right?
Clint Houston, that's it. Yeah. I forget the name of the record.
Conjuration.
No, it wasn't I don't think
was it Rhythm Changes or something else?
It wasn't, the tune wasn't Conjuration.
It's a live record. Live at Fat Tuesdays, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the bass line. Anyways, I forget what the name of the tune is. I can remember the bass line, but not the name of the tune. Apologies.
For a guy Claudette's Way? Claudette's Way?
Claudette's Way.
Maybe.
Sounds like a waltz,
like
yeah.
Track 4.
Track 4, there we go.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you have any, Charles, did you have any association with Pepper at all through Len Dobbin or anything else in Montreal?
Absolutely.
Did you ever see him?
Absolutely. We went to see him in small. I was lucky enough to hear him in small venues, like, there's like 20 people who fit in the place. La Voûte, yes, exactly. La Voûte. Yeah. Wow.
Which is the vault in French, and it was actually a bank vault. It was a very strange venue. Pepper he wedged him back in there, right?
Yeah. And I was sitting like, if I extended my arm, I could touch his bell. It's like.
Denny Christensen said, "What is a giant musician doing in an effing place like this?" And that's in many respects the story of my book. Yeah. What happened? What didn't happen?
Well, life happened. I heard Andrew. I'm aware of this Low Blow music festival that you guys are putting together. I signed up as a member of your website, and I realized I'm number 3. I'm the 3rd person to sign up, and so anyways, the baritone saxophone definitely always will need more recognition, because everybody's more tuned into the higher horns. But Pepper certainly made it alive for me, and congrats on that fest that's happening on the 8th of October. I'm definitely going to check it out in some way or other. And I think the horn is still evolving. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard Leo Pellegrino or Leo P. And yeah, it's like no one played like that before. I haven't heard anybody play baritone sax like that gentleman. You know, so he's got a certain thing happening. The horn is evolving, not the horn, but the music that's played on it, and maybe the horn itself. I don't know. I haven't played any new manufactured saxophones in years. So, but it's always a pleasure to hear new guys. I went to check Andrew Hadro out after I saw the website, and man, these cats who can play now, it's great. And you hear a bit of pepper in everybody, and you know, it's fantastic. It's pretty much all like that.
Yeah, great. Any questions for Charles?
What were the lessons like? I mean, what did he give you? What did he tell you to work on? Where was he coming from with that?
It's basically like I said, he basically said, do your thing. That was the whole lesson. Okay, he gave me stuff to practice and lines. Oh, you can, because I came up with questions. What would you play on this, you know, and what would you play on that? And he wrote stuff out, and I still have some of that in a box. You know, what would you play on a major chord? And he said, would you play on this? And I pull out transcriptions that I did and looked at it and said, you know, he was playing like major thirds on minor chords, and his guiding light was always the melodic line. If the melodic line works, it's, you know, it all depends on how you approach it, where you go from there, and how you get to it. So I'm not saying that you should rest on a major third on a minor chord for the rest of your life, but he's certainly, you know, if you transcribe a bit of pepper, and I'm sure we all have, hasn't been, the guiding force was always the melodic line, and the rhythmic interpretation. His rhythm is very, very strong. So what were the lessons like? Sweet, friendly. And when I started with him, I think there was a bit of amertume in French, aigri. What's that word in English? It's, he was a bit, I'm sorry, I can't find that. I think in both languages, because I'm both totally fluid, but sometimes
What's the word in French?
Amertume. It's a bit bitter.
Bitterness.
That's the word I'm looking at.
A little bit of bitterness.
There was just like a slight tone of bitterness.
Was he ill at the time?
Yeah, I think so.
Just
But I think he
starting
might
his
have
chemo?
Yeah, and I think he might have just gotten, anyways, that's personal stuff. I don't know
Of course.
what it is, but he was always like, the music was always important to you know, I think the fact that he gave me all like copies of all his tunes, or a whole bunch of tunes of his, was a testament to how important he felt that the music should, like his music should stay alive for some reason, you know. Like here's a kid, I was 1993, I believe, or 92. So I was like still young back then. And I think he's happy to see that a young guy was interested in his music. You know? I know, Joshua, you made a record with him. What year did you do that?
What year was it, Gary? Gary knows all my.
February of '86.
Thank you.
86.
And it was a week after the Denny Christensen Big Band, but it was delayed for you because of his chemo regimen.
Yeah.
You're trying to fit it in, but he couldn't. He had delayed for
There
a month
it
or
is.
two.
He knows more about it than I do, I swear.
You're very modest.
You do.
It's normal. You
Well,
research
enough
it.
about me. I'm sorry, Charles, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna have to. I can see that.
Good luck with your
walking
show.
in and out. Thank you. I have.
great.
Go ahead, Gary.
No, I was just saying, great to see you. I haven't seen you since '87.
Yeah, it's true, man. It's time flies.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a grandfather now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, I never thought I'd make it that far. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And you know, life is good. I can't complain. You know, I'm writing a lot of music for film, and I'm
Good.
acting, and then I'm playing as much as I can. And hopefully I'll be able to hear all those baritone players on the 8th of October and dig all the great players that will be on that roster. Have a great session, guys, and thank you for inviting me.
All the best.
Guys.
All the best. So
Ciao,
Paul,
ciao.
you wanna take your turn?
Yeah, okay. Well, first off, it is totally an honor to be amongst all you excellent hobbits, shall we say. And I'm a trumpet player, first off. I do play saxophone, and I have a really nice Mark 7 Barry that I play sometimes. But I'm predominantly a trumpet player. I came through Pepper, through Thad and Mel's band. Huge fan, specifically of the period in the 60s and the early 70s, like Consummation. And then I took that a bit farther because just the way that Pepper played the bottom end of the band, just like connecting with Mel and just how well it swings. And that took me to, Thad and Mean What You Say, H&T Blues. And that led me to really start digging into Pepper even more. Like the sense of his lines, the vocabulary, the forward motion that which he played with. And how it affected the bands that he played with, to me, was like totally inspiring. And that led me to the work he did with Donald Byrd. I think there were 8 records that he did with Donald Byrd, but the first one was Bird in Hand. I think that was the first one they did together under Donald Byrd's name. And I've yeah, right. And I've transcribed almost all of Pepper's solos off that records and none of Donald Byrd's. Well, actually, I've transcribed one of Byrd's off of that, but so that was just incredibly inspiring. And that led for me as a trumpet player to think, well, the baritone and trumpet sound is very, very specific. And like, of course, before I had encountered Thad and Pepper and Donald, there was Chet and Jerry Mulligan, which I had spent some time listening to, but that music had a softness or a gentleness to it that I didn't necessarily find when Pepper was in the band, like spurring whatever trumpet player he was playing with to even greater heights. And that would include like all of the cats that he spent time playing with, including Stu Williamson on the Pepper in Hollywood album, or Lee Katzman, Critics' Choice. He did do some playing with Chet on Chet's record, but I don't really think that Chet really changed much of how he played on that record with Pepper. However, a couple records to my ears that really like, I think speak miles was The Cooker. It was a Lee Morgan record that he's on, and to my ears, Pepper Adams and Lee Morgan have a similar sense of time, a similar sense of forward motion, and their vocabulary is quite similar as well. And I thought that was really kind of interesting. And then the other side to that coin would be a record that I know incredibly well. It would be Conjuration from '84 with Kenny Wheeler. I am a huge Wheeler fan. Kenny was a good friend of mine, mentor, and I spent a fair bit of time with him, was even able to do some projects with him. And I got to talk to him a little bit about Pepper, and he had nothing but, it was like fireworks would go off when he would talk about Pepper, smiles, laughs. He loved Pepper so much, he wrote a tune for him that appeared on Music for Large and Small Ensembles, 4PA, which is the fourth movement of the suite, Sweet Time Suite. It was recorded in 1980. Of course, the Conjuration record is really interesting to me. As a huge Wheeler fan, Wheeler spent a lot of time with another low reed person, that would be Anthony Braxton. Braxton's music is ridiculously hard, especially for a brass player. And for Kenny Wheeler to play that music would be, it's just, I don't know, it's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. However, when you listen to Conjuration, Die Balik number 2 takes the same type of technique to play that he would have played with Braxton. Now, he ended with Braxton in '76, and that the record was '84 Conjuration, so there wasn't really that much of a time period lapse in between that, but just how he was able to phrase that music and push Pepper in a different way that I've heard on a bunch of the other records. I think it's interesting. There's a couple notes on that record that I hope, Gary, ends up in your book. I haven't read it yet. I'm really looking forward to it. And that's there's one tune that Pepper doesn't solo on that album. It's the only Kenny tune that appears on that, Old Ballad. And I would, every time I listen to that record, I lament that Pepper doesn't blow on that, because just to hear him play over some of that non-synthetic harmony, I think would have been really, really quite fascinating and interesting. I've spent a bit of time talking to the guys that are writing the Wheeler biography, Nick Smart from the Royal Conservatory over in London, and Brian Shaw, who was trumpet player in Louisiana, who's now out on the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest. And apparently they've done some digging and have some really interesting anecdotes about Pepper and Kenny. When Thad and Mel first went over to Europe, they hired out a couple horn players that filled out the band. I don't know if somebody was sick or if they, just needed some extra people. But apparently, Kenny was in the band and standing in the trumpet chair that was on the left side of the band, right behind Pepper. And when Kenny had some heat, I don't know the tune that he soloed on, but apparently Pepper just stopped and turned around and was staring at him, and then was just going, listen to that on the bandstand. So, I mean, that's just really cool just to see that, how inspiring that connection can be. And a lot of times with Aaron and I's work, the basis for the Bicoastal Collective in a lot of ways is Thad and Donald Byrd and then Kenny with Pepper Adams in many ways, shapes, or forms. And just kind of like, to my ears, spending time listening to how he has pushed trumpet players to do certain things, and how those trumpet players have pushed him to do certain things, and how he reacts differently depending on, what flavor of trumpet player he has on the bandstand has been really, it's an ear candy to me. I love listening to it and checking it out, which was kind of neat. And, picking apart his compositions, to me, from looking at Pepper Adams' compositions, to me has, been a lesson in harmony. When I was in North Texas, I know Neil Slater would do this from time to time. He would pull you aside, and Aaron, he did this to you, and I know too. He had this collection of music that Pepper gave him, lead sheets, and he would be like, hey, you like Pepper? Yeah. He's like, I think you should look at this. You'll like this. It would be a photocopy of a whole bunch of Pepper tunes that, at one point in time had been copied on mimeograph paper. And so you get to check into his music and analyze what he was doing harmonically, and his melodies from a compositional standpoint aren't that far removed from him as a player. So that's kind of neat. You can kind of see his process slowed down from a compositional aspect. So to me, that has always been really inspiring and informative. So I guess I would definitely consider him to be one of the most important voices for me, influentially, as a trumpet player. So much so that I own a Barry and I try my best to play like him. So anyway, that's just that's my 2 cents on Pepper. As I said, I'm honored to be here, and still to this day, he's a guiding voice for me as an improviser and as a jazz musician. And thank you, Park.
Thank you, Paul. Do you have any other Kenny Wheeler stories about Pepper? Because he toured for a month with her husband in Norway.
Yeah. I don't actually. I know that they are going to be appearing in Brian and Nick's book. Good. Yes, and I bugged them about that, and they're like, "Man, you're going to have to read the book."
You gotta wait. Well, maybe we'll get them on a roundtable or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think that I'm pretty sure that I have Pepper playing Old Ballad on an audience recording. So I'll look for that.
Please.
It might be in the book or it might not be, but I'll take a look and see. And those transcriptions, man, are they available? Can we get them on the site?
I think I've sent you some of them already.
Okay. We'll look. If not, you'll hear from me soon.
Okay.
So Aaron, you're next. Do you want to share with us your relationship to Pepper musically, that is?
No, for sure. And man, Paul, thanks for all those amazing stories, man. As long as I've known you, Paul, and for those of you who don't know the relationship between Paul and I mean, we've known each other for 25 years or something like that, and we've recorded a lot of records together with a group called the Bicoastal Collective. And I've heard Paul talk about Kenny Wheeler and Pepper, but never at that depth. So man, PT, that was really awesome, man, to hear that, kind of expanded versions of some shorter stories I've heard you say before. So thanks for sharing that, man. Ken, it's good to see you again. And Kenny Berger, also, both of you guys were on a previous iteration of one of these. This is the third one, and I really appreciate y'all being out here. And Andrew, it's really great to see you again, man. It's been a few years since I saw you in New York, but anyways, great to see you. So since we have a little bit more time, and I hope you guys will be willing to listen to a little bit of a longer story from me about how I came to know about Pepper Adams. I came to the saxophone pretty late. I started playing saxophone when I was 16, and I had played before that. I was a violinist. I started playing violin in the 6th grade, and I played violin for a long time, probably like 15 years or so.
Wow.
And I played a lot of guitar and stuff like that, and I still play some guitar. But I started playing saxophone kind of late, and I didn't have really any kind of jazz background or anything like that. I just played in the wind ensemble, concert band. But I was always a pretty good sight reader. And so, we had this sort of fledgling jazz band at my high school. And I get put in there and trying to figure out some jazz, how to phrase jazz, and my band director's giving me some different records to listen to. But I kept gravitating toward baritone saxophone. And so when I started at the University of Houston doing a music education degree, this would have been in 1993, I signed up to play in the jazz band. And I signed up to play Barry in the jazz band, and I was trying to wrap my head around a good sound. I didn't necessarily have a sound concept yet or whatever. And there was a guy in the jazz band at that time at the University of Houston named Woody Witt. And I'm not sure if any of you guys know that name, but he's a really, really great saxophonist, classical and jazz saxophonist. He's mainly a tenor player, but he had actually played baritone saxophone in the 1 O'Clock Lab Band for a year when he was at North Texas. And anyway, he was there at University of Houston doing a doctorate degree. And he said to me, he goes, man, you should, if you're trying to get your head wrapped around a sound, you should check out Pepper Adams. And he didn't even give me any album names or anything. He just dropped the name on me. And this is, of course, before you could Wikipedia people or YouTube people. It was just like, okay, Pepper Adams, whatever. Well, I happened to go to Arizona. My wife, I was dating her at the time, but I went out to Arizona where my wife grew up in the Phoenix area, and went into a Tower Records that was there in Phoenix. And man, Pepper Adams, looking through, and here's this album, The Master, right? Oh. And that was the first thing I had ever heard Pepper Adams play, and dropped into the CD player. And I mean, and my mind was really quite blown. Of course, I had heard Jerry Mulligan play. I mean, it was kind of a ubiquitous, anytime any non-Barry player, if you think of Barry sax, a lot of people would think of Jerry Mulligan first. And so I had that sound in my mind as like, well, this is a baritone, how a jazz baritone saxophone player sounds. And then I heard this Pepper Adams album, and it was like, oh, it can also sound like that, right?
Sure.
And I will definitely say that my sound concept is 100% formed around modeling it after Pepper Adams's sound, without question. I don't necessarily think that I improvise like Pepper. For me personally, I think more of a direct influence on my playing is probably Ronnie Cooper, and some of that may just be having come from Texas and having played with blues bands a lot. I actually played tenor saxophone with Bo Diddley for half a year at one point in my life, just playing R&B stuff, and so I love Ronnie Cooper's playing, and he has a similar sound concept to Pepper's. It's different, but it's in the same ballpark. And so that's where my love affair with Pepper's sound and where his playing, where it came from, was from that album Master. And as I finished, going to University of Houston, I ended up, on the advice of Woody Witt, I ended up going to the University of North Texas for grad school. And I got more and more into listening to Pepper Adams albums, and especially the stuff with Donald Byrd. I ended up buying that Mosaic box set, which was like the complete, Pepper Adams, Donald Byrd recordings, and just went all the way through, his entire discography. And I got so obsessed with it to the point of, he has such an identifiable style that I actually ended up writing my dissertation at the end of my doctorate degree on Pepper Adams. My doctorate degree is in classical saxophone. When I was there at North Texas, they were not yet offering a doctoral level degree in jazz. They have that there now, I think they do, Paul, don't they? Yeah.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I was there doing doctoral work, I was doing a classical saxophone degree, but they allowed me to do my dissertation on a jazz topic. The committee did, and so I ended up focusing on. And right now, off the top of my head, I forget the exact title of my dissertation, but essentially, it was kind of codifying the improvisational vocabulary of Pepper Adams. It was not. It wasn't really based around his rhythmic style or his tone so much, but it was more actual patterns and pitch content and stuff like that he played, that to my ear was always like even if somehow you could mute the tone, or like just look at a sheet music, a transcription, and just look at it, you could tell it was Pepper Adams based on these certain kinds of things. And the three things that I focused on that I found very, very common in his playing was obviously a lot of use of the diminished scale, the use of the paraphrased melody from Cry Me a River, which he used a lot, and ending phrases on the 6th scale degree. It may not always be the 6th in. Thank you, Paul. He put it in the chat. The improvisational vocabulary of Pepper Adams. A comparison of the relationship of selected motives to harmony in 4 improvised solos. That sounds like a dissertation title, doesn't it, Gary? Yeah. Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. And then the 6th scale degree, and so that's it. What the 6th scale degree thing isn't always necessarily the 6th against the bass note, but like let's say he's playing, some sort of a line in the key of C, and he would end it on an A. And the chord might change. It might go to like an F dominant chord or something like that, from a C major to an F dominant. So it's really the 3rd, but you're looking at the whole phrase, and he's playing C major, and so it's like ending up on that 6th scale degree. And I pulled up one of the transcriptions that I did. You guys should be able to see this. Yeah. Is everybody seeing the? So this is from the album The Master, Rue Serpente, right? And this is all the melody here. But after the bass solo, the George Mraz bass solo, I have, this is his transcribed solo that I did, and I have all this stuff labeled. It's like you can see how frequently this meant CMRV, Cry Me River variation. So it's just a very slight variation of Cry Me a River. Here's octatonic scale, diminished scale, ending on the 6th here on a C chord. And it goes on and on and on. Octatonic scale, Cry Me a River, octatonic scale, Cry Me a River, Cry Me a River, 6th scale degree, on and on and on. And anyway, I ended up analyzing these four solos from I'm trying to remember which ones I did. Enchilada Baby, Rue Serpente, Bossa Allegro, and it may have been Chelsea Bridge, I think. So I did 3 originals and then the Billy Strayhorn ballad. And anyway, for me, it was really enlightening. And of course, he's not the only guy to ever use the diminished scale. I mean, Sonny Stitt did it a lot. A lot of people used it a lot. But to me, it was those 3 things I mentioned used frequently. And the way he used it combined with his tone and his rhythmic approach is to me what made all those things together, cobbled together, made this incredibly unique and absolutely unquestionably identifiable style, right? And it's the style that I'm assuming that all of us are that's why we love Pepper. It's all those things together. And some of y'all might have some other things from his soloing that you are drawn toward like, oh, here's a thing he always does. And maybe so maybe there's a thing that that didn't stick out necessarily to me. But anyway, that's kind of my journey to Pepper, and those are the things about his playing that attracts me to his playing is all those things I mentioned, his tone, his style. And for me, it was, I think I mentioned this on one of the previous panels, Gary, but it's just he illustrated what the baritone saxophone is able to do, which far superseded, I think, what anything before Pepper, anyone before Pepper thought that you could do on it. And he did it in a really musical way. It's not, you know, I won't mention any names certainly, and not even necessarily on baritone saxophone. Certainly there are musicians out there that can do some pretty phenomenal things that are kind of showy just for the sake of, you know, getting some wows and whatever. But I don't find that when Pepper's playing at all. It's all very musical and very logical, and it was just this next level playing that showed all of us who love the instrument what one is able to do on it. It just set a new baseline for what is expected, what the level could be, and it's up to us to move on from there. So that's my take on it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Someone had a hand. Oh,
Michael.
I did.
Sorry. Michael, yeah.
No problem. I just wanted to put in a little commercial for your dissertation. As a fellow academic, I have downloaded and read your dissertation and played through all your transcriptions, and it's absolutely brilliant. And
thank
so
you.
if you've not read it, it's really a wonderful and scholarly piece of work. And just as a musician and a Pepper fan, I mean, it's an invaluable resource as well. So if you guys have not seen it, seek it out.
Well, Michael, thank you for that. And what I'll do, if anyone is interested, no obligation, of course, but in the chat, I'll upload the PDF of the dissertation, and feel free to download it and share it with your students or whoever's interested in checking it out. So
Fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a great piece of work. Josh, you love The Master. I remember you telling me how much you love that record. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Josh.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great ones, but am I on? Should I start talking?
Yes.
So go, okay. First time I had any kind of encounter with Pepper Adams and his playing. You see, I had two big sisters, and my sisters used to drag me around to different musical events. And one of the places that we went, and I'm talking about when I was a little kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, was the Vanguard. They used to have the Sunday sessions, you know. So I had been in the Vanguard and been to a lot of things. My older sister actually ended up working at the Fillmore East, one of my sisters. So I was like very comfortable, like in the rock kind of thing, and we had a lot of rock musicians around and everything. But at some point I got into Vanguard, and I liked the big bands, you know, and remembering that big, and I went in there, I'm talking about, this was before I even played music. I had no real thoughts about being a musician or a guitar player or anything. And I was in there. And when I think of it now, it's kind of amazing, because I ended up in this place, and then I ended up, you know, playing and recording with so many people in that big bands. I mean, with Mel and with Jimmy Knepper, and later Dennis Irwin, and with Gary Smolian, and Ralph Lalama. But what I really recall is that bands, you know, just rocking the hell out of this room, and all of those high-powered soloists in that band. And then from behind the pole, of course, Pepper, like the baritone was at the end of the saxophone section, and Pepper would stand up for his solos and come out. You see a little bit of him from coming out from behind the pole there, and he would blow that room apart. The sound and the way he played, he took it apart and tore it up every single time he stood up there. And kind of, in a way, jumping to the end of the story, when I did my recording with Pepper, which was not all that long before he passed away, at the session, he sat in a chair, you know, and that for me was almost a very emotional kind of sight, you know, this of course, I'm talking about the first times I saw him at the Vanguard, but I saw him many, many times after that, always playing standing up. But that last date, when he was so had been fighting cancer and was so worn out and exhausted, seeing him playing and sitting in a chair, man, was like, I think for everybody on the date was a little bit of a moving kind of experience, you know. And even on the date, you know, Pepper told me that and I think Kenny Barron was on the date too. It was in the presence of some of the other guys on the date, and he said, you know, I know this is my last date. He said, I know this is my last recording here. And I remember everybody jumping in and say, oh, Pepper, come on, man, now come on, you know. But in any case, he was amazing. And then over the years, you know, I heard him many times. He was playing quite a lot with a drummer that I was working with quite a lot, Ronnie Marabuto. And so I would go in and hang out with Ronnie and hear Pepper. I never had any great conversations with him. I mean, just how you doing, and band sounds great, and you know, nothing memorable, nothing to give you to go on, Gary. But and then of course you're very well aware, and I think you got tapes, Gary, of some of those things out at Three Sisters or maybe Gulliver's out in Patterson that he did with I think Ronnie was doing that, and also Earl Souls and Noreen Gray. And so
that's in the book. He has a lot of it, actually. That's great. Just incredible.
So when it came time to do this record date, I was recording for Contemporary Records, and they were really great as far as as a young musician, my being able to pick sidemen. You know, I was very fortunate with them, and you know, had an opportunity to record with some people that I always wanted to record with. Man, I did a bunch. I think I did about 6 or 7 recording. Well, for them, I think I did 3 recordings with Kenny Barron, and recording with Tommy Flanagan, and the Pepper date with Kenny, and with, I think, Dennis Irwin and Keith Copeland. And so it was a quintet. And so I think it was Barry Harris who gave me Pepper's number. And somehow I got Pepper's number. And I also know that, maybe I sent this to you, Gary, already, but I also know that somewhere, and I've been living in Japan, so I got stuff stored here in New York. But I kept all the cards that everybody gave me, man. I mean, I've got cards from everybody up and down in JS, and I've got Pepper's card, his little business card too. So I don't know where that came in, but I think Barry gave me Pepper's number, and I called him, and it was just a very nice conversation. You know, I told him I have a record date coming up, and I would love more than anything to have him do the date, and we discussed it. And so, you know, I must confess that my dates, we didn't really do much as far as rehearsals went, because we had great guys on every date, and I don't think the music that I was doing was intrinsically all that challenging, you know. So we do a few takes, and that was it. So Pepper asked me about getting together. Let's get together. I said, you know, Pepper, there's not going to be anything challenging on this date. You know, it's cool. You know, if you don't want to do the rehearsal, and I knew he was not well. I knew he was ill. And he said, no, I would like to either just get together and we'll run it through. We'll just talk it through. And I said, okay, I can get out to you. He said, no, you know, I'm fine. I'll come out to you. And so I was living in Weehawken at the time, right around the corner from Barry Harris, as a matter of fact. And he drove out and parked and came up. He didn't bring his horn. And he came in and we just had a chance to hang out. He must have been over at the house probably, I mean, an hour and a half, something like that. Immediately checking out all the books. I got a bunch of books all over the place and asking me about this and that. I can't remember exactly what we spoke about, but
You told me Bartok.
yeah, I think we were talking about the string quartets. I think that's what we were talking about. Yeah. At that time there was the Juilliard String Quartet was doing a whole series of the 6 Bartok string quartets, and I think around that time I was going to that series. And but in any case, I showed him the music just to look at it, and I remember very well. The one thing I do remember is when he saw that I had Oblivion, the monk tune there. He told me, he said, "Oh man," he said, "I can't believe you got Oblivion here." He said, "Do you know?" Now I don't know if this is really true or not, but it's true that he told me this. He said, "Every date I've ever done as a leader, I've thought about doing Oblivion. I've always wanted to record this tune." So that was interesting. And of course he plays great on there. On the date for me also, I mean, he played beautifully. But for me, the most wonderful moment, I think, and I don't think I'm the best judge of these records that I've done, but the way he played, we did a very slow version of Easy to Remember. And to me, like the way that he played that, man, it was like him, God, it was like him looking over this great life, from the back, and maybe like seeing that there wasn't too much ahead. It was very, very emotional, beautiful rendition, man. He was, I think that's, for me, that's kind of the highlight of that whole thing. And I don't know, aside from that, that's pretty much like the whole thing that I can think of with Pepper. I mean, I could talk about, one last thing is that thinking about this today, I actually went into an old notebook when I was playing this morning and took out Ephemera and was playing that. And I think Paul said something about the range of his playing, and his recording on that is really deep and really, really emotional. And that's all, I think that's about it. I don't know if I told you a lot more, Gary, when we were talking about the whole thing. I know we did a concert over at your place many years back, and we did a bunch of Pepper. Well, of course we had to do Pepper Adams tunes, man. We're going over to Gary's, but we get back to them, and maybe I'll get back to a few more of these really soon.
You told me this great story, just to conclude, Josh, you told me this great story about you thought Pepper's horn was going to blow up when you heard him play. You remember that? The sheer force of his playing led you to believe that the horn was going to send shrapnel in the Vanguard.
Blow that thing apart. Yeah. I mean, he filled that place up, with sound. It was just an incredible sensation. You really had a real physical reaction when he played, and of course his playing, man, it was like so serious and so down and brilliant, and as others have said, the idea of taking lines and developing lines and starting someplace and telling a story. And Pepper, I mean, in jazz, what is it about in jazz? I mean, what it's about is developing your own way of playing, developing your own voice. I mean, that's the whole thing. All these other games about technique, or the tunes that we play, or the recordings that we make, all this stuff, the whole thing, the greatest players are the people that have developed their own voice and play their own way. They play from the heart. and Pepper could be so strong, play with so much strength, play a beautiful ballad, could be so funny, could be so ridiculously funny, and just there in the moment. Yeah, it's really, what can you say? You know, I could say Pepper is great. It's just, you all know.
Thank you, Josh. This is fantastic. Andrew, you got a rehearsal, you said, right? Oh. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do in a bit, but I'd be happy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Love
and then Kenny can follow you. But go ahead, so we can get you going.
Absolutely. Yeah, my relationship with Pepper Adams is, I think, pretty different than everybody else's. I mean, first of all, I never met the man. Unfortunately, I'm obviously way too young. And I think my appreciation of him and maybe my relationship to him is more philosophical than maybe musical. Obviously, he's an amazing player. I like his playing. I've listened to a lot of it. But what I really take from him is more kind of his career and what he was trying to do. And also his sense of humor, just from hearing him speak in interviews, but also just musically. Again, that album, The Master, there's a cadenza on there that's just brilliant. I'm sure we all are familiar with it, but if you haven't, go listen to that cadenza. So his sense of humor, which is clear, and his intelligence, like I very much value intelligence. And I think a lot of jazz musicians are afraid to show their intelligence, but clearly he wasn't. And so I appreciate that. And also just in general, his underdoggedness, right? I mean, I think we all would agree he wasn't probably appreciated as much as he could have been. And that's tied into the instrument, right? I'm obviously a big proponent of the actual instrument, the baritone saxophone. I run jazzberrysax.com. I'm all about finding out what other baritone players are doing, you know, for better or worse of my own career. I'm like, all about the instrument and what everybody's doing. So for me, his story is so intertwined to the baritone, because I really believe the baritone can do whatever any other instrument can do. I think the baritone has a lot of negative baggage, because, you know, like if you take a tuba, right, you just can't play on tuba. Well, Howard Johnson aside, most people can't play on tuba what you can on a smaller brass instrument. There are physical limitations. An upright bass, you know, if you're using a bow, it's just not as agile as a violin. I don't think that's true of the baritone saxophone. I do think that's true of the bass saxophone. I've been playing bass saxophone. I think that is crossed the line where there's actually some physical limitations in the instrument itself. I don't think baritone is over that line. So I really think anything you could do on an alto or tenor or soprano even, you can do on a baritone. So the fact that it's not, you know, in as many groups as tenor, you know, all musicians were like, I'm going to do something new, write original music, and they just get tenor, you know, saxophone up front. It's like, maybe you should try an original sound or an instrument before you even think about what tunes. And, you know, like it boggles my mind that when people are trying to be original, they don't even consider the instrumentation. They just go with, cool, here's what I've heard a million times, let's do that. So to me, Pepper is tied into that, right? The fact that he could do on the baritone things that nobody else could do proves that the baritone is as agile, can do whatever else, can, you know, it's a different sound. I actually think there are things the baritone can do that other things can't. The range of the baritone is greater. We can go lower. The tenor saxophone cannot play down to the baritone's range, you know, with any extended techniques or not. But we can play in the tenor range. You know, you spend some time learning smalltissimo and working up there. We have an effectively larger working range than the other saxophones. And I don't think it's less agile. So to me, Pepper is really important to prove that, yes, we can do anything. Yes, we should be included. And, you know, there's the discussion, well, the instrument's big and it's hard to carry around. Well, that's our problem. Like, you know, band leaders don't, you know, like we've made that sacrifice. We do that. So we're willing to bring this larger instrument. We're willing to deal with the pain in the ass that it really is to carry it around. But the fact that people don't think of it first is just a shame. And so, yeah, Pepper and all, I think the descendants of Pepper, you know, everybody, I think really most serious baritone players really find themselves descending more from the Pepper school music than, say, the Mulligan school. I'm totally, I would dream there's things about it, but I think most people, when they really get into the baritone, often are more on that side. I struggle with thinking about the baritone as like an East Coast, West Coast thing, Mulligan and Pepper Adams as like a dichotomy. That's not a really exact way to look at it, and it's not that accurate, but it's an easy stereotype to fall into. So I think most people do come out of the Pepper Adams school, and it's a little bit more, maybe there's more to dig into. You know, if you dig into Mulligan, you can go deep into his sound, but there's not a ton of harmony, the feel, the rhythm. You know, it's great. It's beautiful, but it's you know, you can have read the book by seeing the cover essentially. Whereas Pepper, the farther you go, you're like, wow, I had no idea that was happening. I've heard this record a million times, but I didn't even grasp that. His use of motifs is just crazy. How he'll just seamlessly take an idea and put it through the keys as the tune is going, and then but also just change it. It's not like literally a pattern. He's also molding it to the harmony. It's incredible. So yeah, really philosophically, I just appreciate the fact that he struggled to become well-known and to do things as a leader when everybody was like, hey, can you play in a big band? I myself, I play in a million big bands, and big band is great, but like, I don't really, you know, like I'm fine with big band, but I don't want to play in a big band any more than every other saxophonist. You know, there are tenor saxophonists who play in big bands, but it's not all they do, right? And I feel the same way about the baritone. Like, sure, I'll play in your big band, great. You know, I love your music, happy to do it, but like, you got an nonet, you got a quartet, you got a sextet, like, come on, let's. So it ends up falling to us to make our opportunities, just like I think it did Pepper. You know, the last, I'll let Gary chime in how many years, but like after, you know, he decided that like, I am not going to be associated with the big band as much. That really resonates with me, like to make the decision that like, you know what, I could work forever and just play in big bands and do background parts and do things and whatever, but like, that's not helping the baritone. That's not being creative. That's not, so for me, I really resonate with him. And I try not to have bitterness too. Like I always remember seeing this, you know, the Dizzy Gillespie big band where Jerry Mulligan is the guest artist and Pepper's in the section, and they don't even, not even like a solo, at least not in the video I saw, but like, like I get it. Mulligan was a name and he was more well-known, but like not even to throw him a bone is just like, I feel that, I guess in my career and my playing and being in New York and just being like, you can't play the game like, why do they have that gig? Because, you know, like everybody has a gig for a reason, whatever. But just the fact that they're not calling baritone players, like, don't call me. I wouldn't call me either. but call some other baritone player. You know, call Frank Basile, call Kenny Byrd, you know, like it's crazy that all these groups exist and are playing and are not utilizing the baritone or any other instruments that really can improvise. So my work with Pepper and with the baritone is running the site Jazzberry Sax, and I have a ton of free transcriptions that actually some people on this panel have sent. So I give them away for free. It's not a site that makes money or anything. And really the point is to like spread the word. You know, if a kid who's just learning to get into jazz, just getting into the basics and wants to read a solo, maybe doesn't have the tools to transcribe a solo, they can download a Pepper Adams album transcription and play through it. Try. It's maybe not the easiest place to start in the world. You know, they can download a Ronnie Cooper solo, whatever, a Gary Smulyan solo, whatever the solos that are up there. So I really am trying to do some work to make sure Pepper Adams stays on everybody's mind. I mean, this is obviously something Gary does even more of, you know, writing books, running that site and everything. It's amazing. So I feel like a lot of the work I do is maybe in conjunction with Gary, and obviously I love it when he sends me stuff to post. Yeah, so a lot of my relationship to Pepper is just kind of appreciating him and trying to spread the word, and making sure other people find out about him. Because really, yeah, when you come to the baritone, you find Mulligan first, which is fine. Nowadays, honestly, you'll find Leo P first, which I'm okay with. Like I don't listen to Leo P, but if people get into the baritone that way and then they find out, oh wow, actually, there's all this other stuff, you know, that Leo P checked out. If you go, you know, 10 years ago when Leo P was at Manhattan School of Music, he was studying Pepper Adams stuff. He's doing something else now, but like, so I'm cool with that as long as it gets you to the baritone and you will find the good stuff. So I really, in my relationship to Pepper, it's just about spreading knowledge and doing stuff like that. We mentioned a little bit, October 8th is actually Pepper's birthday, and we're doing a baritone marathon. So we've got 10 groups playing, and it's this group that Gary Smulyan has sort of put together called Low Blow Music. And that's really hopefully just the beginning. This was, aside from the fact that this whole thing has fallen apart 3 or 4 times, we've had a bunch of venues and then it's not happened. We tried this at the beginning of COVID, but this is the first event and of many. We're going to have more. And really the point is just to promote the baritone, and you really can't promote the baritone without Pepper Adams. So I have a feeling Pepper Adams is going to be, you know, involved with a lot of the events we're going to do. We've got other events in mind. I'm not going to I've been burned a couple of times and had all the events fall through. So I'm not going to, spoil any surprises, but we've got some events this year, next year that we want to do. We want to involve. We're hoping other people do it in other cities. This happens to be a New York City thing, but Boston, I have somebody in Detroit who's interested, Toronto, we're hoping this is really a way to get people to do baritone events and things, because you have to do it yourself, right? You can't wait for that guy to call you for his quartet. I mean, you can, and I hope it happens, but it's at the point where we need to do it ourselves. So yeah, that's happening October 8th. And we've got a membership thing. There's a crazy amount of content we're giving away for $25. We each did like each of the 6 of us that were working on the site and the stuff did like a 5-minute lesson. I'm giving away my album for free. Brian Landris has an album for free. Gary sent us a bunch of photos. Actually, Gary sent a couple photos. I think he took a Pepper or somebody took. They're very candid shots. I'm sure Gary Carner has seen them, I think.
No, I have not.
Oh, okay.
Unless it's the Dick Oates shot of the band in 77.
Well, it's not even the band. These are shots of Pepper in the tour bus, I think, at some point. So yeah, I can't imagine Gary
as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because Gary wouldn't have been probably in the tour bus. But anyways, there's lots of cool stuff like that, and it's all about the baritone, and a lot of it, of the people involved in this, we're all inspired by Pepper Adams. So yeah,
I'm gonna lean on you
less musically.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Finish up. You're gonna say something? I was gonna say I'm gonna lean on you for Pepper Centennial, which is coming up in 2030. Hopefully we'll all be around for that, but I wanted to make that into an international celebration. So if you're laying out the tracks for that,
I'll get back to you about that.
Right.
Any questions for Andrew before we get to Kenny? Kenny Berger, that is. And then Ken Kellett. The 2 Kens.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to run and I will watch this afterwards, because I actually do want to hear what Kenny has to say. Although I know from in person talking to Kenny, he's got some amazing Pepper stories, and I think he's shared with some already. But thank you so much for letting me be here, and it's great to see you all. Great to see the baritone in action, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. So Kenny Berger, do you have any more gems to share? Third one you've done.
I'm getting some echo here. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. I was talking with Gary Smullian about this a few days ago, because I think I'm one of the only ones who's been done on all 3 of these things. So apparently I have to keep doing it till I get it right. And I told Gary Carner after the first one, I said, I think I used up all my A material on the first one, and then I found some more on the second one. And I have a couple of stories that are peripheral to Pepper. They involve him, and they also involve me and other baritone players. But so Smullian and I were talking about, like, what am I going to say? And we were talking about how just, Pepper was just such a complete original, a complete one-off, on and off the, musically and personally. And I was saying to Smullian, if I go on the panel, I'd like to take a straw poll and say, have you ever met another person where you said, that guy reminds me of Pepper Adams? Neither have I. We were talking about how he was this intellectual, basically self-taught on a lot of that stuff, though. He didn't have a degree in fine art. I think he tried to major in literature in college, but did, whatever. I identify with him that way, because I am one of the last ones left who I don't consider myself to be a product of the jazz educational industrial complex. I have a master's in jazz history and research, which I got when I was 50 years old, in the great program at Rutgers that was pioneered by my good friend Lewis Porter. And it would be wonderful to see him if his video wasn't shut off. Hi, Lou. Love you, buddies. And anyway, so I was kind of, I played alto at first. I didn't have a private lesson on the saxophone until I'd been playing about 5 years, And I had my academic training was totally different. I probably did a lot more woodwind doubling than most of the other baritone players here, because I was a bassoon major at Mannes College of Music back in the 60s, when none of these places had jazz, And And I remember, like a lot of the conversations I had with Pepper, we never talked about the saxophone. I was thinking about this is probably 50 years after I first met Pepper. To this day, I have no idea what facing his mouthpiece was or what strength reeds he used. You know, and I knew that his old baritone was a 39,000 balanced, because one day when I was in Chicago with Thad and Mel's band, Dodgen and I went over to the saxophone shop. The original location of the saxophone shop in Chicago was right near an Elstop, and they had a blank wall, and everybody who came to the place was asked to like sign their name and write the serial number of their horn on there. So that's how I knew that Pepper had a 39,000, right? So, and my relation to Pepper was, I had that same kind of like white light experience with him like a lot of other guys. I first heard him on the radio. There was a lot of jazz radio. I grew up in Brooklyn, and there was even jazz on AM radio when I was coming up. And I remember this track that I heard. You know, I'd heard like everybody else. I'd heard Jerry and I heard Harry, and I said, you know, but the stuff that I really wanted to play was more hard swinging stuff, and I wasn't hip to the Blue Note stuff yet. And then I heard a track from the Donald Byrd album. What is it called?
The Catwalk.
The Catwalk, right, with Pepper and Philly Joe. And I said, "Oh man, you can play the baritone like that? You know, that's what I want to do." It was like a revelation, you know. And I just wanted, before I forget this thought, somebody was talking about Pepper's sound filling the room, the presence that his sound had. This is an occupational hazard with baritone players, especially now, where rhythm sections are amplified and rhythm sections keep getting louder and louder, man. You know, some of the fusion guys even wound up playing sopranino saxophone just so they can hear themselves above those loud rhythm sections, right? So with the baritone, it's a slippery slope. You want to project, you don't want to get swallowed up by the rhythm section, but you also don't want to have a sound that's so bright that it's annoying, you know, and that it doesn't have, to me, the baritone, a good baritone sound is built from the bottom up, not from the top down. You know, there's only one great baritone player who sounds to me like he built his conception from the top down. It's a totally different way. I think John Sermon sounds like that, but he's great for his own, you know, but he's terrific. And, so I used to go through this thing where I would go to session and we can't hear you, you know, give him a mic, you know. So I decided one of my goals in life, aside from anything else, was to be a jazz baritone player and to not be a microphone player. You know, and I went that way at one point, you know, playing the brightest mouthpiece I could play. You know, I played on a Lawton for a while, but it's one thing to be able to play like that if you're always playing under your own terms. As a soloist, you could sound like anything you want. I was still doing a lot of freelance work and playing in sections, and you know, I would say, "Wow, I can hear." You know, now I can cut through, but it wasn't a good sound. And Joe Temperley warned me about it. He said, "You know, if you use that kind of a setup, you're going to get really tired of holding it back to play a full dynamic range and to blend." And I found that so. You know, Pepper, his sound was edgy, but it wasn't too bright. It was dark. It had darkness and edge at the same time. It was very unusual. And again, you can hear that presence in his live sound. And also, I think one of the secrets to that was articulation too. You know, when he played, he used to say, if you play a run of 16th notes on the baritone without putting, or eighth notes or anything, without putting a little attack on every note, it sounds like playing a gliss on the piano with the pedal down. So there was always a little bit of a push, air, or tongue, you know, behind every note. But and Pepper, you know, my own history with Pepper. So I heard this track, and then about 1971 or 72, I can't remember how I first met him. I started going to the Vanguard the minute the band started playing. That was like the biggest news in New York. You know, at first I heard about it on the radio. Alan Grant announced months before they started playing there. Thad Jones and Mel Lewis have formed a rehearsal band. Next thing, and I wound up actually playing one of the last Monday night jam sessions at the Vanguard before the band started. Roland Kirk was hosting these sessions, and I remember it was probably a couple of weeks. And then when the band started, you know, every musician I know, we try to be there as often as possible, you know. And I would always like sit right on that banquette, that bench right next to where Pepper was, you know. And somehow or other, I don't know if I introduced myself to him or somebody else did. Anyway, so around late 71, 72, he started to call me to sub for him. A lot with Thad and Mel's band, a lot of Mondays, a few little tours, road stuff, and also with Duke Pearson's band a few times, you know. But we never, you know, it's very funny when we hung out. We never talked about the most of the music we talked about was classical music and Ellington. Like he talked about his favorite symphony composer was Arthur Honiger. And he turned me on to that, and you know, just this. Well, what Smelly and I were talking about is, you know, the uniqueness of this guy, where he's this small, thin, you know, what they used to call an egghead back in the day, right? But he had chipped teeth and fingers with no joints in them from playing ice hockey, right? And he was just, you know, he was like a one of a. He was, you know, the only baritone player who was playing in that hard bop vein at the time. He was the only white guy who was part of the Blue Note stable, right? Even though they weren't allowed to put his picture on the front of an album. But, you know, he was in these situations, and, you know, and he was the same person, whoever he was hanging out with, you know, he was, you know, he had that kind of literate, you know, he didn't, unlike a lot of jazz musicians, when he was hanging out with other jazz musicians, you know, he didn't try to go, man, hey, yeah, baby, blah, blah, blah. You know, he addressed people and he talked to people the same way, no matter who you were, you know. And as far as Pepper, I remember one time I did this 2 or 3 month tour with Thad and Mel's band. It was their last U.S. tour. We went all the way by bus we went from one end of Route 10 to the other. We went all the way down south, across, up as far as Vancouver, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we did a Sunday matinee in Detroit at the Pontchartrain Hotel. They had this outdoor deck out there, and they had the bands play. And I get there, and there were 3 or 4 guys come over to me. Where's Pepper Adams? You know, we went to high school with him, you know, and I'm thinking, well, you know, man, you're stuck with me. You know, so, and there was another story about that. It's about another great baritone player, and a guy who was a dear friend of mine was Joe Temperley. Joe, if you knew Joe, he was the sweetest guy in the world, but he had this kind of grumpy kind of way about him too, with the Scottish burr. And one time he was playing at the Vanguard subbing for Pepper, and there were people sitting right on the side. And where's Pepper Adams? Where's Pepper Adams? And finally Joe had enough, and he turned to them and he said, he's having his testicles removed, and they're being put on display at the Jazz Museum in Corona. You know, so that was a pretty fun. You know, it's a tribute to another great baritone player. You know, and so I don't know that, you know, as you know, anecdote wise, I don't think I have any more about. But you know, my best anecdotes were probably in the first 2 the first 2 roundtables, and.
You acquitted yourself perfectly, as always. I'm sure everybody agrees.
Yeah, I never, by the way I learned, I was listening to people talk about their, you know, my educational background's a lot different, because I guess you weren't expected to have a degree in jazz before you hit the scene as a musician. Well, most of the places you couldn't, you know, and, what was I going to say? Oh, shit. See this, man? Education. Oh, I never was into transcribing. The only time I transcribed a bunch of charts was when somebody hired me to transcribe a bunch of Buddy DeFranco solos for a book that came out. But I know I never transcribed a solo of Pepper's, but I can sing about 50 of them. And people were talking about their favorite recording. This is another thing. Guys are talking about, the baritone players were talking about how idiomatic Pepper's style was in terms of being the baritone. I can't imagine trying to play that way on a tenor or an alto. You know, you're talking about blowing the instrument apart. That's probably what would happen. And my favorite recorded solo of Pepper's is the first track, the title track on Reflectory. Harmonically, rhythmic drive. And one thing about that solo that's notable, one of the first things I've noticed is that if you listen to it, the climax of the solo happens in the lower register. And it's not like a comic thing where guys honk. It's not like a rock and roll honking. It's the line goes low, starts low and goes up. But the low notes aren't like just up, you know, like the way a lot of tenor players, they'll kind of slap a low note and then go high. These are real full notes, and it's a full line going up. And it's the climax of the solo. I mean, it's the most intense part of the solo, and he hits it in the lower register. You know, and that's something that, number one, I don't think would really be effective on anything but the baritone. And to my knowledge, Pepper's probably the only guy I could think of who would have played a solo like that and be able to pull that off. You know, build a solo like that, and then reach a climax. You know, reach a climax in the bottom of the horn. So. My recommended listening. I know there are a lot of great. I love those other records that people are talking about, but my personal favorite is Reflectory. And also in terms of quotes, they were talking about so a person's quotes. First of all, that's like the last vestige of humor. You know, you don't hear like young players don't quote anything because most of there haven't been any songs written in their lifetimes that are worth quoting is another thing. But, and also a lot of the younger players are trained to not make mistakes, and you don't mess around. Your brand has to be serious. So the humor is not there. But Pepper, he reminded me of Charlie Parker in that way, because Charlie Parker would quote Hindemith's Kleine Kammermusik, you know, The Rite of Spring, and Barnacle Bill the Sailor, stuff like that. And Pepper, you were talking about the Live at Fat Tuesdays album. There are two great quotes on that album. Coming out of the bridge of Alone Together, he quotes Springtime for Hitler from the producers. And on the same record, on Diabolique 2, Rhythm Changes, he starts a chorus with a quote from the Cradle Song from the Firebird by Stravinsky. It's a famous bassoon solo. So, that's all I got. If you're going to ask me back again, don't expect much because I can't think of anything else to say about Pepper Adams. But great to see all you cats, and thanks for having me.
Great as always, Kenny. Ken, you're tasked with following that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, fellas, good to see you all. Hope you're all well. I have a few points I want to cover here. Number one, I have learned, like, if you show up late, you have to follow Kenny Berger. And man, Mr. Berger, Ken, you're a hard act to follow, my brother. Also, regarding what Ken was saying, I am a rhythm player. I admit it. But it's the drummer's fault that we're too loud. Okay? I just wanted to get that out of the way. Marcus Belgrave told me very young, he said, the drummer is the leader of the band. And I just want you guys all to know that the bass player wants the rhythm section not to be too loud either. Okay, I covered that. Now, about Pepper, I won't take too long because so many great things have been said here. And I'm kind of like Kenny Berger. I've probably shot my wad the first time I was here anyway, you know. But I still have a couple of things I'd like to say about Pep because I was very lucky to hang with him. And he was kind of our mother's milk when we were coming up, you know, the young musicians, like we had that tradition hammered into us, you know, your Detroit players, so play like it and all that. And Pep was a great hero to me, even though I wasn't a saxophone player. I just loved his playing, and I knew a lot of his music and I heard him a lot, and finally got to see him at Baker's Keyboard Lounge at 8 Mile in Livernois, where I met Gary Carner the first time, I think. Anyway, and I got to see him, and I had a seat right up front, and I actually talked to him a little bit while he was on the bandstand because I was just so attracted to this guy, man, because he was a great brother. And he was playing his tune Apathem, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And I just love the tune, man. So he was asking asking the guys, I can't remember who was with him. I think Will Austin was playing bass. And he said, what do you want to play? And I just said, how about Apothegm? Because I didn't know how to pronounce it. So I said, how about Apothegm? Pepper looks down, he says, it's actually Apathem. And he was happy to play it. It was a joy. And many years later, I was lucky enough to be the house bassist at Baker's and played with, backed up Pepper as the house bassist like 3 years in a row, I think, something like that. And that was really amazing. But if I could just take a quick second and then I'll get off because you guys have so many better things to say. But when I hung out with Pepper, it's very similar to what Kenny Berger said. You know, we didn't talk about music that much, man. The man was fascinating and he was kind and he was mischievous and full of mirth and mischief, you know, and just a great guy to hang with, man. And as far as his music, like I couldn't even begin to touch the level of scholarship that I'm hearing here from Aaron and from everybody, man. Tom, I think, sorry if I'm forgetting your name, brother, the trumpet player. And, but I will say that I thought of his music as geometrically beautiful. I saw Pepper, or I thought of him like kind of as a sculptor. I don't know if it's because I'm a bass player or not, but I think of terms and geometry with music and the shapes and all that stuff. And that's the stuff that grabs me. And his stuff was romantic as all get out. He was a romantic, man. And he was also a sculptor, man. He just made these amazing sculptures in the air with his sound. And I just want to thank you all for having me. It's an honor. And Gary and everybody that's doing this stuff for Pep, good on you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. It's righteous. Now, next time, don't make me follow Kenny Berger, huh? Hey, my respects to you all.
Thank you, Ken. So Noah, do your thing.
All right, you got it. Hi, everybody. My name is Noah Pettibon. And it's my privilege to be probably the youngest one here. Having the least experience with Pepper, technically. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for everything they've said about Pepper so far. It's an amazing privilege to be able to listen to what you all have to say about him. I've been aware of Peppers for 8 years, since I was 16. Do the math. Almost coinciding with discovering his music, I discovered Gary's writing about Pepper. So I've sort of come to know Pepper, the music of Pepper Adams and the character as portrayed by Gary simultaneously. So, Pepper, for me, I think about Pepper Adams every day of my life because of the impact he's made on me. And of course, I've become a baritone player by now. When I first discovered him, I had been playing saxophone for 6 years. So I was already well into my time playing saxophone. But it wasn't ever a big aspiration of mine to be a musician professionally or anything. I just did it in band. It was a fun thing to do. I mean, I loved music, but didn't necessarily grow up in a musical household or anything. But when I discovered Pepper Adams, I mean, I think the way I discovered him, to me, is still sort of, I don't exactly remember what the first thing was, but I think I was using like the Pandora music app, and that's a radio app which just you put in, I want straight ahead jazz or something, and it gives you a random set of different tracks that are popular. And I think what came up was Pepper's Plays Charles Mingus album, and it was like Haitian Fight Song, I think was the first time I heard Pepper. And man, that's a pretty cool introduction. The way he articulates the melody I still can't do that. You know, on a technical level, I still can't do that with my tongue. And that is just one of many examples of ways in which Pepper sort of sets an example. Like I constantly feel as though I'm like living in the shadow of that, but also like I'm being uplifted and inspired by the possibilities simultaneously. It's a hard thing to grapple with, but let me back up though. So I found Pepper in high school, and immediately, and ever since then, it's really been the bulk of my listening for jazz. My friends, I remember, I wish Andrew were still here because he runs the website jazzberrysax.com. And of course, which posts transcriptions of Pepper and other baritone players' music or solos. And in fact, there's a transcription of that Haitian fight song solo on there. And I remember in high school, before and after band practice, I had the saxophone players and I would all get together and read that transcription and play it in unison and just try to get it. And man, can you get that one line? No, but or whatever, and discuss it. And it was such a cool thing such a cool resource for us to have been able to have access to. And I just would have. I've talked to Andrew a couple of times. I need to thank him though, and just extend my thanks out into the world to him for having built that, and of course Gary's efforts too, and everyone else who's contributed, Aaron's transcriptions, all this. But anyway, man, I mean, I at risk of talking all day, I could talk for years straight about Pepper, because there's no subject matter I know better, because I've spent the last 8 years digging deeply on his music, trying to find out who he was as a person, because of course I was born 12 years after he died, so I missed him by a long shot. I'm kind of used to that feeling of sort of playing catch up though. My grandfather was a boxer. He was actually the world champion in the middleweight division in 1932 to 4. His name was Freddie Steele. And so, but he died in 84, which is about 2 years before Pepper did. So in a certain way, I'm kind of used to playing catch up on people who I, have some connection with or whatever it is. But one way or another, like Gary just put his book out last year on Pepper, which has been incredible. I'm kind of piecemealing my way through it as a way to sort of, I just want to appreciate it and, let it breathe, because it's been eye-opening. I mean, if I didn't already know, you don't know a person, you can't know a person unless you live a day in their shoes. But it certainly helps to have met them. And I've not done either. But Gary's work in that book it's like, there's just so many layers to the man. I feel like I pretty much, I've got a decent grasp on the music, but the man is just, that's why it's valuable to me to be here, and such an honor to be in the presence of all these people who knew him, worked with him, whatever it was. That is immense. I think the only person who I've ever met in person who had met Pepper was Barry Harris, and that was only recently, briefly, and it was a couple of years before he passed, unfortunately. Would have liked to have seen him again, but anyway, what do I have to say about Pepper? I've written a few notes on my thoughts. To me, it's striking just the immense breadth of his work. In terms of when he plays, it's like a history lesson of music and culture. In the 70s, he's quoting culture from the 30s, and up. He in his humor and the musical references, or and then of course hearing these stories about his interests you know, he was interested in literature and cinema and, you know, the arts in general. I mean, to me, his music is inextricably linked to his personhood, as any musician's is. But with Pepper, the personhood is so interesting and the music is so interesting that, you know, it's really worth study. The thing that I find remarkable about him is the deeper I've looked, the more I've found. You know, that is not true of all musicians. Some of the greats, you know, I mean, like you can study them for a few years and appreciate them, and for the rest of your life you might enjoy listening to their music, but it's like you get the picture. You know, it's like that's who they are. I get it. You know what I mean? And they were their own people, their own depth, of course, but Pepper is special in that way. You know, there's a different kind of depth of the layers to his, you know, because he was such a deep thinker, and so it's just sort of what we're hearing seems to be the overflow of whatever dense, you know, set of thinking and interests that were living in his mind. And so as a baritone, like Andrew Hadro was talking about what it's like to be a baritone player and a fan of Pepper Adams. And of course, Andrew is closer to my age. I don't know how old he is. Past his 20s, but not by much, I don't think. And so his experience is probably a lot more similar to mine, because of course I didn't see Pepper play, but like I said, but you know, it's a constant sort of fight internally for me between whether to imitate, because you don't want to imitate. I can't remember who said it, but I think Michael Brecker, maybe. People would say, man, I'm scared I'm going to sound like Coltrane if I transcribe too much of him. And it's like, man, you could transcribe Coltrane for the rest of your life. You're never going to sound like him, because there's only one Coltrane, right? And there's only one Pepper Adams. And so as hard as any of us might try, it's just never going to happen. You're never going to, nobody's ever going to be hearing it and go and mistake you for Pepper. Kenny, go ahead.
There's one that reminds me of a famous quote from Yogi Berra. He used to say, if you can't imitate him, don't copy him.
That's beautiful. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so, however, try as I might, Pepper's, the inherent logic in his playing is so strong that it's more or less, it's been very difficult for me to separate, you know, to play very different from him, or you know, I mean, it's quite a journey trying to. I understand his music pretty well. Like I said, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on it. I mean, and trying to find my own path in that is difficult. I mean, like again, I'm not going to be mistaken for Pepper, but it's just I use him as a nucleus. You know, it's like this center by which then I can kind of stretch out. And if I ever find myself in a wayward, you know, position, I mean, I can always kind of remind myself, well, if you're out in space, just come back to Pepper, and then go back out from there. And to me, that logic is so instructive. I've had a lot of friends in school over the years come to me and say, can you help me with this solo? Or you know, like I'll have the second trumpet player who's never taken a solo say, can I please, you know, can I get a word from you about how you would approach this? And I've used techniques that I understand from Pepper, sometimes actual literal melodic shapes or something, or just, you know, the ways that he would take an idea and mold it and develop it. And like many of you have said already, and I've given them those things that I learned specifically from Pepper that aren't aren't generally use, I can't remember who said it, but about the jazz educational industrial complex. That's a beautiful way to put it. It's like, I mean, there's a certain, it feels like jazz education and jazz the music has they're sort of different islands at times, and for me, I had to remind myself why I loved this music. I had to kind of step off of the education I was receiving and kind of, I've watched so many of my friends lose their love of the music because of their experience in the educational system. And to me, that's tragic. And for me, the way I've combated that is Pepper Adams and his music. It's like I said, there's just such a strong logic in it that it's valuable for any young musician, really any musician of any skill level, to gain at least any level of understanding, a basic or a deeper understanding. I found, I've watched people turn around in a day on the way they're playing just by me just kind of sharing with them some of the concepts that I've come to understand that I got from Pepper. And I just wish that his music and work was more widely known. It is becoming more widely known gradually. No thanks in part to the efforts of those alive today, like, Gary's work especially, bringing that to life. I mean, just the energy coming out of 30 some years worth of thought and effort, directly focused on one man, is just, it can't be contained. If we tried, we couldn't suppress that. And it is, I'm very happy that work was put in, because I don't know if I would have necessarily had the same relationship with the music that I do if not for that work. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about why I think Pepper Adams is important to the wider world, and I am going to be a lifelong advocate for his music. It's just I can't change it now. It's a path that I can't step off at this point. I should also mention that deliver some news, I suppose, that I've been elected by John Vanna and Gary. John Vanna was writing a part 2 to Gary's biography on Pepper, which would be a musical analysis of his style. And it was John's choice to reach out to myself and Frank Basili, who was not able to accept the offer, to actually take over the project, because John is he has a life and he's not able to keep up with it at this point. And so it's too bad that John couldn't be here. I would have liked to have heard him talk about Pepper, but I will be the taking over that project now, which to me is slightly overwhelming. The work starts now, but anyway, it is my privilege. So
we're happy to have you aboard, and thank you so much for contributing to this panel. Appreciate it. It's great to have youthful energy, right, Kenny? You're muted.
Anything,
but, what's that? Anything what?
Say.
Anything I say? Well, this is what I'm going to say now. Let's go to Michael Fitzgerald, because he's got to go.
Oh, Mike. Nice to meet you finally.
And then we'll get to Matt Snyder, and we'll wrap it up with Lewis and Michael Pauers and John Wheatley if he comes by. He's supposed to be here, but go ahead, Mike, because you got to go. Nice to see you again.
It's good to see you. Good to see everyone here and meet some new people. When asked to participate in this panel, I began thinking about what Pepper means to me, when and how I first encountered his music. Like some of the other younger people, I never saw him perform. And it must have been right around the time of his death in 1986 that I first heard him on records. And as with many of my longtime favorite musicians, I didn't initially seek out his music specifically. I found it serendipitously. Pepper just happened to be on others' records, so many others' records, though certainly he was a big reason for the high artistic quality that made those records important. So thinking about this, I can think of 3 LPs that put Pepper on my radar, and I would like to share those with you. Probably you know them. Hopefully you will have some fond memories of the sounds. Definitely the first and the most prominent, Kenny Berger said it, was Donald Byrd, The Catwalk on Blue Note. It's recorded May 2nd, 1961. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be as well known as many other Blue Notes by Byrd. For a long time, it was unavailable on CD in the US. I didn't even own, the 1980s French Blue Note reissue LP myself, the one that I heard. It belonged to a trumpeter friend. I remember the day he got it, it was at J&R in New York. But we devoured it. We scrutinized it, every track. It's neither the first Byrd and Adams record nor the last. They first appeared together on record in '58, and the last appearance was in 1970. This is from 1961. It's towards the end of their working group. The lineup is similar to maybe the better-known Royal Flush album, which came 4 months later, but it's got a different rhythm section. It's got Duke Pearson on piano, Layman Jackson on bass, and Philly Joe Jones on drums. Now, Royal Flush is the first session done by that rhythm section from Herbie's first record. That one's got Herbie, Butch Warren, and Billy Higgins. Although Pepper and Donald Byrd had been together for several years, this is the first studio encounter between Pepper and Duke Pearson. And Pearson was fairly new to New York, having moved there from Atlanta in the fall of '59. Kenny wants to say something?
No, I guess when you were talking about him and Donald, Pepper used to like to tell people that he and Donald Byrd met during the Detroit race riots, which is perfect Pepper.
So before joining Byrd and Adams, Duke Pearson had been the replacement for McCoy Tyner in the Art Farmer Benny Golson Jazz Tet. It's possible that he got that gig through Lex Humphreys, who played on Duke Pearson's early Blue Note Trio records. Duke Pearson had been in the Byrd and Adams group for about 6 months, but the only recorded evidence is the Live at the Half Note pair of LPs. And while Herbie Hancock he's indeed tremendous on Royal Flush, on the Catwalk, Duke Pearson brought with him his compositions and arrangements, which are so tasty and beautiful here. And interestingly, Gary has a story in his book that indicates that Philly Joe Jones wasn't even supposed to be on this record. It was supposed to be that Live at the Half Note rhythm section, which means, Lex Humphreys, but they couldn't find Lex. And so Philly Joe was a last-minute substitute, to which I say, thank heavens. I can't imagine this album without Philly's distinctive style. It's got so much personality, but although he's prominent, he never overshadows things the way that, having someone like Art Blakey might. And while Lex Humphreys might have had more experience with the repertoire, Philly Joe's heavily featured on the Catwalk, in the Burning version of Cute, where he plays with sticks, and on Hello Bright Sunflower, where he plays brushes. None of the original tunes on this record ever became jazz standards. The only tune that someone without this album might know is, Duke Pearson's Say You're Mine, which he recorded twice in trios in '61 and '68. After about 50 years now, we've started to see a couple of these tunes appear on albums, and they're mostly led by smart baritone players. Some people might write off this record as just one of those Blue Note hard bop dates, which are very much like Another. I mean, the cover, it has like Off to the Races, and the later A New Perspective. It's got Donald Byrd leaning on a car. In this case, I think it's a Jaguar Mark II. But I think the personnel, including the fact that it's baritone and not tenor in the front line, and the repertoire, as well as the performances, make it stand out. Like, Gigi Grice, who's close to my heart, Duke Pearson was not content to write, a unison line for the A section, leave the bridge open for blowing, and consider the tune done. He adds harmony parts and introductions and interludes and shout choruses and codas, background figures. The tunes on this record are almost all originals, but there was, clearly enough, preparation time wisely used to allow for things like, double time passages to come off without a hitch. Pepper's ensemble playing is spot on. His solos are perfect. They're concise and they're full of these twisting lines, flawlessly executed. A high point for him here, I think, is Each Time I Think of You. Pepper takes the first solo. He's playing these ornamented bebop lines. He's adding syncopations on the second chorus. And one of the things I noticed in re-listening to this is how, the great aspect is how their instrumental registers, Donald Byrd and Pepper's, contrasted, and the change in the sonic spectrum is so refreshing. And I don't think you get that with a different instrumentation. If it's alto and trumpet or tenor and trumpet, I think the baritone and trumpet, has more of that contrast. So I encourage anyone who hasn't listened to this record in a while to just pull it out. And if you possibly haven't heard it, check it out. The second LP that I vividly recall getting is Lou Donaldson, Lush Life, which is another Blue Note record. The original Japanese title was Sweet Slumber. It was released in 1980, though I never knew that album. Since the tune Lush Life doesn't appear on this record, it's actually Sweet Slumber is actually a much better title. And this was recorded January 20th, 1967. This one I had on a cheap Applause LP. It was issued in 1982, and it features standards in a beautiful little big band arrangements by Duke Pearson with great players, Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, and McCoy Tyner. They're occasionally getting short solos, but mostly they're playing accompanying roles. And it's this, again, I said this is from 1967, by which time Pepper was a go-to guy for Duke Pearson. He was bringing some consistency to a series of similar sessions, but also adding his strong personality where, another baritone player might not have been noticed. In 1967, Duke Pearson arranged Blue Note sessions for Stanley Turrentine, Lee Morgan, and Blue Mitchell in addition to this one, and they all used these mid-sized bands, 4 or 5 horns. It's often the same guys, and most of these dates included Pepper Adams. Here's the thing. Pepper gets no solos on this LP, not a one, but his sound is essential. His baritone is the very first thing you hear on the record, on the opening track, Sweet Slumber. Maybe it's not quite, Charles Mingus Moanin', but it grabs you nonetheless. And I think this record made me think a bit more about the importance of ensemble playing and how some great players are not just great improvisers, but they can really contribute as section players. I mean, of course, there are great section players who are not soloists, and maybe they're really only known to contractors and conductors. They're the guys. They're always prepared. They're always consistent. They rarely flub. They've got a high level of musicianship, and they have good intonation. They know how to blend. They're impeccable at following the phrasing and articulation of the lead players. These are the players that work a lot. They're the names that discographers see over and over again on sessions. Pepper, in his own way, fits this description, but he was not on hundreds of sessions just to read parts, even if that is what he did on this particular Lou Donaldson date. I don't think he was hired to be faceless. I think he was hired because Duke Pearson or whoever, they wanted his sound and style to be the voice of those written parts. And the last record I wanted to mention shows Pepper in perhaps his best known setting for this kind of ensemble contribution, which is the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band. But here he does get a solo feature. And the album is New Life on Horizon. It's recorded December 75 to January 76. In addition to playing in that on again, off again Duke Pearson big band, Pepper was, of course, a mainstay in the Jones Lewis Jazz Orchestra. This record is from the mid 70s. It's not one of the early solid states, but it was on CD fairly early on. So, back when I was getting into this, we took what we could get. In fact, it's one of the last Thad Mel records that Pepper did. The moment that grabbed me on this was his break and solo on Jerry Dodgen's Thank You. It's a ballad, strong Ellington inspiration, About halfway through, Pepper lets rip with an exuberant, raucous explosion. I mean, people were talking about he's going to, blow the saxophone apart. Mel Lewis switches to sticks. Pepper floats on top with a double time solo, primarily rooted in diminished scale patterns, one of which it develops out of the tune's initial 3-note melodic motive. And after this, there's a rubato piano solo, and then the band returns playing slow figures in augmentation. They're rhythmically stretched out. But these are lines that were sort of prefigured in Pepper's solo. And it's brilliant because he sounds entirely improvised, but you realize after the fact that he planned it all so that what seemed so unexpected and iconoclastic really is all part of the same fabric. Incidentally, Pepper does the same thing on a tune from that Catwalk record, on the tune Duke's Mixture. He includes a figure from the shout chorus in his solo, before the shout chorus happens. And so, having noticed these things, I'm now curious to listen for other examples of that. Of course, everyone knows that record has another great Pepper solo on Little Rascal on a Rock. So those were three records that were very important to me early on, as I was, getting started in jazz. And again, Pepper happened to be on all these records. It's not like anyone told me, go get some Pepper Adams records. Very soon after, I heard 10 to 4 at the 5 spot, and that was on a twofer set that also had Gigi Grice and the Jazz Lab Quintet, which that was early exposure to Gigi Grice for me that led to bigger things. Someone earlier mentioned Lee Morgan, the Cooker on Blue Note. That again, I think might be Lee Morgan's finest LP. So anyway, that's my recollections as a Johnny come lately to the world of Pepper Adams. But they're vivid memories because of the impression that they made on me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was a nice history lesson there. I'm glad you got it in before you had to leave. Go ahead, Kenny.
I don't want to monopolize, but I just haven't, because I remember that Little Rascal on a Rock, because the number of it in the book is in my handwriting, because I was playing on Monday night when they brought it into sight read, and I remember Don Butterfield came down to the Vanguard to play the tuba part. And I heard a rumor too that those changes were so hard that Pepper actually took them home. But the thing about Thank You was I played that a bunch of times, and the hardest thing about playing that was there's that break, and the rhythm field changes. It was like a ballad, and then it goes into this 12/8. And man, the hardest thing was that for me to have this come out of this break and set up this 12/8 and be locked in with the rhythm section, and it used to throw me. And Pepper just went, burn. I mean, he was just right in there, man. There was just no doubt. I mean, how quickly he connected with that, it was amazing. And that was really hard, man. That used to really kick my ass. And Pepper just burned right through it.
Glenn Wilson said his horn was leaking like crazy, and he said, screw it, I'm just gonna go for it. Didn't care. Let's see, how much time do we have, Aaron? Are we gonna run out? Are we good?
We have another hour.
Oh gosh, I think everybody will pass out by then, but let's get to Matt and then Michael and Lewis, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
And excuse me, because I gotta run. There's someplace I
Yeah.
gotta by 6.
Josh, great seeing you.
I love that everybody and Kenny Berger's inside stuff, man. It's great.
Everybody's going to get the link when Aaron prepares it for posting for YouTube, so you'll be able to relive this and see what you missed. But thanks so much for being here, and all the best. All right, so Matthew.
Yeah, I want to thank Gary for inviting me to this. At first I said to him, I'll just listen, what do I have to say? And he said, no, you have things to say. So just to say who I am, I'm a musician. I play clarinet and bass clarinet. Those are the home instruments, but I also play baritone and tenor. And I first got into Pepper because when I was first getting really into jazz, which would have been toward the end of my time in college at Rutgers, where I went with Mike Fitzgerald. Mike Fitzgerald's an old friend of mine. And I was listening to a lot of Thelonious Monk at the time. And then not long after that, I went to Indiana University to study with David Baker. And I'd gotten as a gift the complete Monk on Riverside. So I was just drowning in Monk for a couple of months at that point. But what really caught my ear, just as I woke up to, whoa, was that live at Town Hall where Pepper plays the solo on Little Rudy Tootie. And I that's what made me want to start playing. I mean, I kind of knew I had to get a double together because I wasn't playing saxophone yet. I was just all clarinet. I knew I got to get a double together, and the natural double, if I'm playing bass clarinet and clarinet, is to play baritone. So I kind of was sort of edging toward baritone anyway, and I went all in and learned that. And then Mike, hearing that I was getting turned on to Pepper, so you got to hear this stuff. You know, the 10-4, the 5 spot, and the other Donald Byrd record he was talking about. Many years later, I have to say my favorite of the Donald Byrd Pepper albums is Bird in Hand, only because Charlie Rouse is on it too. And I feel like Pepper's kind of steps it up slightly because Rouse is there and they're bouncing off each other. I'm not aware of any other record where they were together on. But what I wanted to say about Pepper is that, I mean, yeah, those of us who are baritone players rightfully want to claim him as ours and talk about the role that he had in bringing the baritone to the fore and really pushing the instrument where it had never gone before. But I feel like saying that he was the best baritone player in history is underselling him. I really feel like, and this came to me because I read Gary's book and in the process listened to all those amazing recordings on his website, which are a total treasure. I mean, I really listened to a whole lot of Pepper in a very short amount of time. And then right after that, by chance, I was assigned to review, because I'm an archivist at the New York Public Library and I'm active in various professional organizations. I was assigned to review the new Michael Brecker biography by Bill Milkowski. So right after I got through listening to an avalanche of Pepper, I started listening to an avalanche of Brecker, including stuff I'd never heard before. And I got the same feeling from both. Like, these are both primo jazz musicians in every way. They're endlessly creative. They are technical masters. They have their own sound. They're definitive in a certain type of a language, because Pepper brought the language of the modern jazz language, Charlie Parker, you want to call it bebop, to a really high developed level that the only other person who did it to that level in terms of bringing it to that level was like Barry Harris, in terms of a scholarly way, and, you know, obviously both from the same background. So I feel like that he just really deserves to stand as one of the greatest of the great jazz musicians of all time. He's there with Sonny, he's there with Brecker, he's there with Byrd, he's there with Dizzy, he's there with whoever you want to talk about. Woody Shaw, another one of my... As a clarinet player, I sort of pick who my heroes are because there's no one clarinet player. There aren't enough of them to really have one who's your real main guy, but so I sort of pick and choose from different people. And so for me, there's like Ralph Towner, the composer Ralph Towner, there's Pepper, there's Sonny, there's all these people, but Pepper's up there. And I think we really need to not be so... I mean, I understand why we want to claim him as ours, as baritone players, but really that is selling him short, I think. We should talk about him as the primo master he was, and he transcended, like any really amazing jazz musician does, he transcended the instrument. Which doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about him as the great baritone player. And all the other issues around baritone are like, yeah, it's not a popular instrument, hearing low is difficult for people, but you know, pushing him in that way, I think, is really it's still on us to do, but, you know, I feel we're on we got a solid base to stand on to say that this is one of the greatest of all jazz musicians, you know. The other thing about Pepper, which I took from Gary's book, and which is a really amazing topic to think about, is that he was a white jazz musician, and that he was so completely in that world that he was mistaken for a black musician by Frank Wolf, who was angry about it. that's the thing that gets me, is that he was pissed off about it. And that sort of speaks to, that's like a very modern feeling, because there's been a lot of talk in the past decade or so about cultural appropriation, and there really is something worth exploring of what does that mean, and what does Pepper's entire life have to say to that argument. That's a whole, I mean, I said to Gary, this is like worth a paper, or I'm not a researcher, but this is worth a paper or a book about why and how Pepper was able to so inhabit this world naturally, just as a natural outgrowth of his personality, when there aren't a lot of other jazz musicians who managed to do it to that extent, that they sounded so completely native that they just, however you want to call it. I have Frank Wolford saying sounding black, but sounding authentic within the language. And I think that's a really deep, because jazz has had this undercurrent for much of its existence. I mean, you divide between black and white musicians. How some white musicians, who the best ones, are like closer to Pepper, that no one questions their authenticity. But Pepper somehow, because he was from Detroit, I think, in an extremely black milieu, comes to naturally inhabit it and just be authentic within it. It's worth an exploration as to, a deeper examination of what that has to say to our current world. Other Pepper things I think of is that he started on clarinet. I wish he kept on playing clarinet. I wish he had doubled on bass clarinet. It would have made his life a bit easier if he could have done some more session work. And I feel like he would have been an amazing bass clarinet player who would have been the alternative to Eric Dolphy. I love Dolphy, but there was never really anyone to sort of be a kind of more of a slightly more mainstream alternative. Buddy DeFranco played with bass clarinet, but never really didn't pursue it, and he didn't really sound all that different on it anyway. But someone like Pepper, I feel like, could have really translated his language to bass clarinet and done something really amazing with that. I kind of regret that he didn't, and he would have been great on clarinet too. I see that he found his voice, and you can't argue with that. But I sort of think of what was lost, and I just also the whole issue of him not doubling when so many great musicians of his generation, all of his friends in the Thad Mel band were strong jazz musicians, and also made a living in the studios, and he could have too, and chose not to. And in some ways, I feel like he chose a life of near poverty because of that. What is that? Anyone else hear that? No.
Somebody's letting the air out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kenny.
I don't know. I never heard him say this, but he did show me once some of his fingers, and he said like he couldn't have doubled on the flute even if he'd wanted to, because his right pinky had like no joint in it. There were a couple of his fingers. So it might have been a thing where, on the bass clarinet, you've got 5 keys on the right pinky. So that might have been kind of a limitation. They're heavier than they are on the clarinet, and there's 5 of them instead of 4. So that might have been a factor. I don't know if he would have chose to a life of starvation. I don't think he was. I don't know. I don't know if it was that, but it might have been something because of these physical. A couple of his fingers were like sausages. He showed me one time, so that might have been a factor, maybe not, but that was a condition that he had.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mel Lewis told me he sounded great on the bass clarinet. He recorded on 2 dates. One with Benny Goodman, and one on the Bud Shank plays the music of the soundtrack to the James Dean story.
Of James Dean.
Yeah, he borrowed Bob Wilbur's bass clarinet for that. Mel said he sounded great, but he just didn't want to do it. And I explore that in the book also. Really his stubbornness. Or you could say his allegiance to his instrument, or you could say his allegiance to just liking time to read and go to museums.
There's another issue about Pepper I just realized, because
Noah, pay attention to all this, man, because he's going to be writing the book about this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
a few years ago at work, I work at the library, and I processed Sonny Rollins' papers, and so I got a pretty up close view of his career. And one thing that I noticed in looking at all his business papers, that he played a lot of festivals, and he was often getting asked, as often happens in festivals, do you want to come on at the end of this evening and do a jam session with all these other people, you know? And he would always say no, always, because as far as Sonny was concerned, what he did, his art was the lone improvising soloist. And he didn't want to know about having, you know, the band always revolved around him. And sure, his nephew, the trombone player whose name I'm spacing on, was always there. But it was always about Sonny. And I feel like this is something that Pepper felt too, that for him, the quartet, him as the featured voice, that's where he realized that his specialty and talent was in the free improvising soloist. So that even though he did all this excellent work with Byrd and did the great record, you know, that I love with Charlie Rouse, and did all these records, all the horn players, once he was in his own situation, he was a leader. He did not have that. He didn't have small groups where he was only one horn player, unless it was someone else's date, obviously. But and I feel that's an interesting thing, that this lone wolf sort of realizing where you're, and Sonny is like this too, realizing where his talent lay. His talent lay in spinning out variations and exploring that, and playing a long time and figuring out how to spin out everything that's happening in with his ear. And that's all. That's all I had to say.
Wonderful contribution. I'm so glad you talked about the issue of race with Pepper, because we exchanged emails about that.
Yeah.
And
You know,
how
you didn't
important that is. And here's
mention
Noah. So
you didn't mention in the book the funniest Pepper story that's in Bill Crow's Jazz Anecdotes book, which is the one where he was going up to visit Mingus, and Mingus is living in this doorman
the way he
building.
changes language on the phone.
Because Mingus is on the phone with somebody at the union saying,
beer's
"You
in the
white
fridge,
motherfucker,
Pepper."
I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna blast you away with my shotgun." And he turns to Pepper, who's walking in the door, and says, "Cold beer in the fridge, Pepper. And another thing, you white motherfucker."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, gee. Well, that's
Anyway,
great.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, a pleasure. Thank you for your contribution. So we're going to wrap it up with Michael Pauers, and then Lewis, I'm going to let you do the coda here. So Michael, go ahead.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for having me, Gary. This is really intimidating for me, because there's been so much wonderful information shared already. And as Gary explained before we started recording, I am definitely something of a square peg in a round hole here. I am, by academic training, I'm an ichthyologist. So I study fishes. I have my doctorate. I'm a professor of biology at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. But I am also a very serious baritone saxophonist and a student of Pepper's. And that's how I ended up crossing paths with Gary. He ended up seeking me out. So as a faculty member, I'm expected to give lectures and presentations and whatever. And I got sick about talking about fish. And so I did a whole lecture and performance on Pepper Adams, and this had gotten publicized on websites and whatever. And about a week after I gave that lecture, this mysterious email pops up in my campus email account from Gary, probably wondering who I am and what I'm doing, horning in on his game. But we ended up having a wonderful phone conversation, and then Gary ended up sending me all of the chapters to the Pepper book, and I did quite a lot of proofreading and fact checking. I read every chapter at least 3 times, not exaggerating, and did a lot of work with that. So most of what I know about Pepper actually it comes from my listening and from Gary. So I'm really happy to be here with that. And so Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And so rather than repeat all the accolades that you guys have all much more articulately expressed than I have, I will share. This is not my Pepper story. This is my friend's Pepper story, and it's pretty cute, I think. So I have a friend. His name is Rick. Just so I don't have to say my friend and his friend all the time. So Rick, um, shortly before the birth of his first child, had planned a getaway week to New York with a friend of his because they figured, okay, I'm gonna have, Rick's thinking I'm gonna have a kid. I'm never gonna get to do this again. So he and his friend planned like a jazz getaway weekend to New York, or a week or whatever it was, where they were just going to go listen to jazz, live jazz all week in New York. And sure enough, his daughter was born early, just a couple of days, but it threw off the planning for the trip. Rick couldn't go. But his friend does go. And the first person he goes to see play live is Pepper Adams. And so Rick's friend had gotten into his cups a little bit and got some courage and was talking with Pepper over the break. And he told Pepper the whole story about how he was supposed to be here with his friend and all, and his friend couldn't make it. And so Pepper just said, well, what is your friend's daughter's name? What's Rick's daughter's name? Well, Marissa. Pepper grabs a bar napkin and writes on it, "Welcome to the world, Marissa. Love, Pepper Adams." And he sent that napkin home to my friend, who still has it to this day, almost 40 years later, or however long it's been. So that's what I'll share about Pepper. I could certainly go off about his style and his sound and everything like that, but I think that's been well covered, and I think we should hear definitely what Mr. Porter has to say. So.
Thank you, Michael. Lewis, you want to just say a few words? Because Lewis, we've gone a little over time, so out of respect to Lewis, we'll give him the floor for a minute, and he can wrap it up, and then we'll have him back next time.
Yeah. If
Great
I can go first next time.
Yeah, I'll let you do that.
First of all, Kenny, thanks very much for the shout out. Love you too, and you and I are due for a catch up. Let's email, and we'll either do a phone talk or a FaceTime or something like that, because we definitely do. And as far as Gary, I would like to remind you that on the discography, he dedicated it to somebody named Lewis Porter, probably in very bad taste, but Gary was the first graduate student I ever had. Before I had a graduate program, I was able to accept an occasional graduate student when I was teaching at Tufts. So we do go back to 1985, when he was 4 years old and I was about 12, I think, at the time. And we were both prodigies, of course. And so I have, kind of been in touch with Gary all these years and made an occasional suggestion, all right, maybe a lot of suggestions on the discography, and kind of been very bemused about him saying, I have a publication date for 2033 for the next part of the biography. And I said, Gary, nobody announces publications 10 years in advance, number one. Number two, let's first find out if the world is here in 2033. Then we'll decide about publication dates. You can't plan that far in advance. If the planet is still here, then we'll talk about it. Or if humans are still on the planet, that's another story too. And finally, just one more thing I'll mention, then I'll let you go, which is that unless I've forgotten something, I only ever saw Pepper with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Band. When it was still the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Band, I saw it 3 or 4 times. The first was in the summer of '66 when it was a new band, and the person who took me, no joke, was Pete LaRocca. And he said, there's this great new band at the Vanguard. I said, Pete LaRocca. I'm not going to say no to that. Now, that is not a Pepper Adams story, really, but it is a little bit of a long story how I ended up going with Pete. And that, if you'd like, I can tell next time. But it's, to be fair, it's I also have it written out because Cadence asked me to write that out so I could just send it to you. Because it's not really Pepper, but I can tell you that every time I saw the band, Pepper made a strong impression because he's a geeky-looking little guy with a huge sound and a very distinctive approach to the instrument. So even when I was 15, which I was the first time, I said, wow, who's that? You know? So that's all I'll say for now. If you'd like, I could say a little more next time, but it's a pleasure to see everybody, a pleasure to hear what everybody had to say. I was listening the whole time. I had my audio on the whole time. I'm just under a little bit of time pressure. And I will put in a plug, which is the reason I'm under time pressure is I have a newsletter now where I put out all my unpublished jazz research that I shared with people, for example, in Kenny Berger's class. And it's a newsletter on Substack, and I'm always trying to come up with more stuff to post. I've only been doing it for a week now, but I already have 240-something subscribers. So, all right, my friends, good to see you.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you to everybody. Aaron, as always, thank you for hosting. I'll get John Wheatley to come back and the other people that couldn't make it this time to come back that next round. Aaron, we'll talk about that for sure. It'll be next year sometime.
Yeah.
Any final words? We've got 5 people standing. Kenny, you want to say a few words? Oh, you're talked out on Pepper, right?
Yeah, I'm talked out, I guess. It's just there's one thing in the book that I didn't know about that I can't get my head around, is the idea of Pepper Adams at one point being a Bechet-inspired soprano player, emerging as Pepper Adams like less than 100 years later. I don't know how that happens, you know.
Yeah.
That's just so strange, you know, and it's just such a, you know, it's another example of just what a total original he was coming out of that, and then, you know, all of a sudden there he is.
Yeah, Andrew Holmesy said that distinguishes him, like Jimmy Knepper too, that they had their feet in the entire vocabulary of the music going back to the 20s, and that just made their music that much more deep. And I guess we could attribute that change, that shift, to that group of great musicians in Detroit that he fell into within a week or two in Detroit. I mean, you know, you meet Flanagan and all those guys. Billy Mitchell and Thad Jones, you know, it's
going from Bechet, who's characterized by that big vibrato on the soprano, and Pepper develops this style with basically no vibrato on the baritone.
Yeah, it's huge.
Switch, you know, and I mean, I'm glad you told me that, but it's like it's just such a weird, you know, I never would have suspected that.
Yeah, it is amazing, quite frankly. Well, Noah's going to be writing the book, so he can figure more about that. Not to put any pressure on you, but you got plenty of time, Noah.
Yeah,
if the world
true.
still exists, right, Louis?
If it's still around.
But anyway, what a pleasure to wrap up this third roundtable of what I hope is a few more, where we'll also get some more female baritone players, I hope. Claire Daly was in the second one. Lauren wasn't available. There's others I'd like to introduce. I mean,
I could recommend a couple names.
Yeah, give me their emails and we'll try to make that happen so we get a much wider perspective.
You got to get Mosca on here.
John Mosca.
I mentioned it to him once. He'd love to do it. He would be great.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and also I'd love to get Dodge in, but I don't know to what degree his stroke has affected him.
I don't think that'll be. You know,
not a good idea.
He turned 90 last month, and
and he had a stroke. But yeah. But anyway, thanks so much. All the best. Stay healthy and well, and we'll see you around. Louis, always a pleasure. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Gary.
My pleasure, friend.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
week,
Aaron, for
everyone.
hosting.
Bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.